All right, guys, coming down in 3, 2, 1. And for those of you who are with us, you didn't need the 3, 2, 1. You know that the ShawLocal.com Bears Insider podcast is underway. I am Hub Arkush. Our Shaw Media Group sports editor, Kyle Nabors, is with us. And Sean Hammond is now honeymooning. First, he had the horrible excuse of a wedding last week to get out of a game. Now he's got a honeymoon. I'm kidding. Sean's doing great. We understand everything's going well. He will be back next week. And good enough to grab his chair for us once again is the former managing editor of Pro Football Weekly, Arthur Arkush. And Arthur, thank you for sitting in. And since you're doing us a solid, I'm going to give you a chance to get the first crack at all this. I am kind of at a loss for words at this point. What a clown show the Chicago Bears have become this week. We'll go back and touch on Cleveland in just a few minutes, but I'm sure everybody listening to this is aware of it's not a competition at quarterback. We don't know what it is. And when Matt Nagy announces Friday afternoon that he's going to wait until Sunday to announce the starter, Arthur, from where I sit, there's about 102 things wrong with that, and I can't find anything right with it, but maybe it's just me.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of thought you were still just talking about the clown show we saw on the field Sunday. I mean, otherwise it's just the usual Bears who can't seem to get out of their own way, but I guess gamesmanship, right? That has to be the only thought here, is that perhaps it helps the Bears gain a competitive advantage by not saying. I don't know. I don't have a problem with them not saying. I'm just going to have a problem. And actually, I don't know how you guys feel about this yet, but I would think if ever there were an opportunity to get Justin Fields back on the field to gain some confidence, not risk losing this kid and putting him back on the bench right now, that's what seems to be the no-brainer part to me. So that might be controversial on this podcast. I don't know yet. But as far as not announcing the quarterback, I guess I wasn't as stunned by that. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, all right. You know what? Let's just touch on two things here, Kyle, and then I did bury the lead. We'll go back and pick up a little bit about the disaster in Cleveland and then work forward through the week. But there's two things that really trouble me about this. And the first is that last week, or maybe it was 10 days ago, whenever it was, Jason Peters had a really good interview with us where he explained that it's night and day pass protecting for Justin Fields and Andy Dalton. Two totally different techniques, sets, different play calls that they might use, because one is a pure drop back passer who you expect to stay in the pocket. The other one, is coming out of the pocket. Looking at the disaster of trying to protect the quarterback last week, are we really to believe that Matt Nagy has split practice this week between Dalton and Fields and asked these guys to practice both techniques and not know which one they're going to use on Sunday? That's problem number one, and I don't believe that. I think the Bears know exactly who's starting. I think everybody in that locker room knows who's starting. I mean, it would really be scary if they didn't, to be honest with you. But it brings you to number two, which is with Justin Fields. I wasn't worried about him until this. I'm really impressed with the kid. I still think he's got a chance to be a great quarterback. He is wise and mature beyond his years. He can handle the disappointment of last week, until it's followed by his head coach saying, it was so bad that I'm going to wait until the very last second to see if I can play the other guy. And then if I can't, I'll go to you. Because that, in essence, is what Matt Nagy has done here, and I didn't think there was a way to make this more of a clown show. But that, to me, is just really disturbing.
And you're doing it for a guy that we don't know how healthy his knee is even, right? So you're putting that in the back of the mind too. Really quickly, I just noticed this. If you're joining us live streaming this week, want to appreciate everyone that joins us. The StreamYard setup changed a little bit this week. They went with Twitter instead of Periscope. It doesn't look like comments are coming over through Periscope, only through YouTube. So if you are on Twitter and you want to jump in and ask us questions, just click the link in Hub's profile over to the YouTube page. I'm going to bring you here onto the YouTube page, and you can jump in the chat there and ask questions. But the all comes back to me when it comes to Justin Fields. Part of it's confidence, right? You want to build the kid's confidence coming off a bad loss, but there's typically two things you see with rookie quarterback. There's two ways it can go when they struggle, and pretty much all of them do struggle early on. Either you have quarterbacks that don't understand what NFL open is, where they're holding the ball too long when they have receivers that actually are open, which is what happened with Justin Fields on Sunday, what you saw out of Tua last year. or the other is a quarterback that is being too aggressive, trying to make too many plays. You've seen that out of Trevor Lawrence so far this year. Those are usually the two different dichotomies you get with these quarterbacks. And to me, when you have that first road bump, you don't immediately start saying, well, maybe we'll go back to the other guy. You invested a first round pick. You got to show confidence in the kid. You got to put him out there and coach him up, get him into the film room, make him feel more confident, and see what he can do the following week. If it continues to struggle for 2, 3, 4 weeks, then you do what the Miami Dolphins had to do. You put Tua back on the bench. You put Justin Fields back on the bench. You can't do that after one bad performance.
Well, Kyle, see, but there I got to take exception with you a little bit because it's the one area where they've been consistent. He wasn't on the field because they said he's our starter or he's ready to go. He was on the field because they made what I think was one of the huge mistakes they've made so far of pretending he's the number 2 quarterback. I mean, clearly with what we saw last week, number one, it was not his fault. You can't expect any quarterback, to successfully run an offense under that kind of pressure, but especially a rookie in his first start who's never seen any of this. But he was out there because Dalton was injured. So I feel strongly, particularly after the way he played, that if Dalton is healthy, he should be out there. But clearly Dalton is not healthy. Now he looks better than I expected him to be. Did see him at practice, this week. He got better each day, but he also clearly was not 100%. And you got to look at the other side of this. I mean, why this is a must-win game for 100 different reasons, Arthur. What if you put Dalton out there and early on he gets injured worse? And now you've really magnified the situation. So I don't mind, Dalton getting his job back. He should get his job back if he's truly number 1. But under these circumstances, I think any reasonable coach has got to look at this and say, all right, this is a winnable game. This is one we better win on our schedule. This is a game we can win with Nick Foles or Justin Fields. Let's get Dalton healthy. And instead, now we don't know, Dalton may not even dress Sunday, but the indication is that they're serious about possibly playing him. And I don't know in what world that makes sense.
Right. So we're definitely all on the same page as far as that is concerned. I just don't have as much of an issue with them not announcing the quarterback. It doesn't matter to me. But guys, I think we need to talk about now in the significance of this game, not only saving the season, but let's be real clear. Matt Nagy's coaching for his job, correct? I mean, I'm sure we all agree on that too, after what we saw last week. And to me, I just think that what's going to potentially save him is showing that he can develop the kid, not getting Andy Dalton back out there to play. If you're lucky, probably middling, maybe above average, slightly Dalton football with the rest of the supporting cast that is getting more and more exposed here. So that to me is also just looking bigger picture at this point, why maybe there should be a switch here sooner than later regarding the overall thinking of the QB.
Well, this to me, it comes down to what does the front office and ownership value more at this point? Do they value more trying to get to 9-8 or 10-7 and make the playoffs, or the long-term development of Justin Fields? To me, you got to pick a road here, right? I mean, and you got to communicate that to your coaching staff. What do you want them to do? Otherwise, Matt Nagy's put in a no-win situation. I mean, the guy doesn't want to lose his job. No one wants to lose their job. They're going to do what they think is best to secure that. So he needs clear direction. Maybe he's getting that and we just don't know, but it just doesn't seem that way.
Well, guys, but what's the old saying? Those who fail to learn from history are destined to repeat the same mistakes, or something to that effect. Arthur, I think the Bears have picked a lane. I think it's pretty clear from their 100-year history, from the last 7 decades, that they haven't had a franchise quarterback, and knowing the McCaskey family a little bit. And I'm not, criticizing them. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying I think I do know what their lane is. They want to win as many games as they can. They want to go back to the playoffs. They want to convince themselves that they can contend for titles, that they can win playoff games. I'm not commenting.
An alternate universe.
I am not commenting on the reality of that, situation. I'm saying, I'm answering your question. Pick a lane. Sure. I think if you followed, the Bears' history, that's the lane they're in. And I think it's pretty clear from what Nagy's doing that he knows that, because if they go, 5 and I always have to do the 17 math over again.
Yeah, I know. I did the same thing. I was like 9-8. Is that right?
Yeah. If they go 5-12, but the last 3-4 weeks of the season, Fields is playing really well, Matt Nagy's still going to get fired. The flip side of it is, if you're still not sure about Justin Fields, week 15, 16, 17, 18, but the Bears are in the playoff chase, then Nagy's going to be okay. That's the Bears' history. And so that's probably the only part of this, Kyle, that I feel like I do understand. I just don't think that he's taking the best steps to get there. I don't see how this is the best way for him to turn this thing around and forget the Lions. They're going to beat the Lions, guys. I have no problem getting out on a limb and embarrassing myself. I'm not guaranteeing anything. I'm telling you, they're going to do it. And if you want to know, yes, they're going to cover the spread easily. I think they're going to win by 2 touchdowns because you look at this situation, guys, and this is the part nobody ever wants to accept. The quarterback is one of 53 guys on the football field. There's going to be 52 other guys out there who are truly embarrassed by the way they crapped the bed last week, okay? They can play well enough on defense. They can run the ball well enough. The Lions are not a good football team. I keep hearing people raving about, how competitive the Lions have been and how tough they've been in their losses. That is not true. They were getting buried by the San Francisco 49ers and showed up for a quarter and a half after the Niners went on cruise control. They did play the Packers tough for a half. And then they disappeared in the second half. Yeah, they needed a miracle to lose to Baltimore last week, but if any of the Baltimore receivers would hold on to the football, they probably wouldn't have been in that game either. So I'm sorry, if the Bears come out and play their best game, they're going to beat the Lions. So that's not going to tell us too much about the rest of it. And so to me, this was his chance to set things straight, to do the things that, winning, mature NFL coaches do. And instead, it just feels to me, Kyle, like Matt's floundering around right now and really acting out of some desperation.
Yeah, you're starting to get that sense. I don't know if the Bears would actually pull the trigger to fire a coach in season. We know that they don't like doing that. And here, someone asked this question. I think this is a good place to start as people start to jump in and ask questions here. Here it is. Sorry, Thomas Klein. Assuming Nagy is not the coach next season, what can the organization do to minimize the disruption that would cause in Fields' development? And that's really a good question, because if you fire Matt Nagy, what is your plan moving forward with the coaching staff that you still have in place to not screw with what you view as your long-term quarterback?
Well, I think there's some obvious answers there. Number one, you're firing him because you don't trust him to continue Justin Fields' development. So obviously you try and go find the guy that you are going to trust the most to do that. And so the most important thing to do there is, first off, to make sure that Ted Phillips is nowhere near, that decision and that hiring process. And whether George McCaskey would or will not do that, I don't know. But at that point, you guys, you're reliant on the owner to go find the right coach,
Well, and I think Thomas's question is, if you fire, let's say I agree with you. I think the Bears are going to win this week. As ugly as last week was, I think the Bears win this week. But if they don't, then we're going to get into the realm of really wondering if Matt Nagy is going to be fired in the near future. I think Thomas's question is, if you do that, what do you do to get through this season to make sure Justin Fields is still progressing to where, going into year 2 with a new coach, you feel like this wasn't a wasted season?
Well, you've got these guys on the staff, Flip, John DeFilippo, you got Bill Lazor. These guys have some street cred as quarterback developers. They're not going to go anywhere. You're not going to fire the whole staff in season. And then you've got the mysterious Tom Herman hanging around, who clearly is viewed by some as a really sharp offensive mind. I think what would be intriguing, and I don't see this happening because, again, first of all, I don't see him losing Sunday, but, you got to go a step at a time. If they were to make the move in season, Arthur, the only 2 guys on this staff that I could conceivably see being a reasonable choice as the interim head coach are the only 2 guys that nobody has heard from since they became Chicago Bears, and that's Mike Pettin and Tom Herman. Pettin at least has some NFL head coaching experience. He's got significant successful coordinator experience, which neither of these coordinators have. And to me, he's kind of the logical choice if you have to do that. Herman is more kind of myth, more reputation than anything else. But he is another guy who in coaching circles is fairly well thought of. And until his issues the last year or 2 was thought to be a future NFL head coach, a top college coach as a head guy. So I think it's one of those guys. And I think the answer to the question is how well those guys continue to work with Flip and Lazor and anybody else on that offensive staff. It really doesn't change much in how they're going to try and develop Justin Fields, the quarterback. Not Justin Fields, the leader, not Justin Fields, the person, but Justin Fields, the quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, as putrid as the product on the field has appeared, there still is a lot of experience on that offensive staff you mentioned, and then just overall coaching experience in the other two guys you mentioned. So I wouldn't worry as much about a hiccup there. And in the event that our question was regarding what happens in the offseason, well, there's not any alliance to anyone that would be left over here. Obviously, you're going full speed for someone like Brian Dable or Greg Roman, one of these guys who is a shooting star, Kellen Moore maybe. But guys, I think the better question is there any reason to think that the Bears' overall approach, I don't know if you guys, how much you've discussed Arlington Heights this week, is there any reason to think that the aggressiveness there, it was our friend Mark Potash who wondered that on Twitter, by the way. Hey, Potsy, if there could be any correlation between the aggressiveness from George and Ted to pull the trigger on Arlington and just how they might have a little bit itchier of a trigger finger regarding a head coaching change too for the first time ever, correct, in season?
Yeah, and Potsy is one of my absolute favorites. I hope he knows that. I think you guys know it, but in this particular case, I don't see any connection here because there is no urgency to pull any triggers. The Bears in Arlington Heights, and we'll get into this a little bit more, have signed a PSA, I forget what it's, something sales agreement, but it's a potential sales agreement. There's nothing. The latest report I've seen is the Churchill Downs people saying that they don't see this sale closing until the end of 22 or early 23. There are a dozen and a half different things that the Bears have to do before they even get to the difficulty of the contract and working through all that. And so, I think these are kind of separate issues. It was time. This is happening because they now have, again, I don't want to be talking about three subjects at once. We'll get back to this in a few minutes. I'll explain why this made so much sense. But this has begun the clock on what is going to be a 5 or 6 year process. So, to suggest that they've been really aggressive or done that they see an opportunity in front of them and they're trying to.
I guess the thing, if they're willing to part with the $292 million, would they say, hey, what's the remainder of Nagy's contract if we're already going all in that regard? You know what I mean? Just like mindset. Yeah,
but guys,
any uptick in aggressiveness.
Yeah, but this is where, again, people always want to go for all the old tropes and, the McCaskies, the Houses are cheap. They don't want to pay him if they fire him. That's not what this is about. We actually don't know if this is the last year of his deal or if he has one more year after this year.
Right.
But they have fired plenty of coaches with a year or two left.
The McCaskies have spent more than enough in the past, just recent memory for anyone who's still using that to know it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, they're not. It's not about them being cheap. They spend money the same way most NFL franchises spend money. So it's really just a question of, and this is one of the things I admire so much about the McCaskies and about George in particular. They don't hang people out to dry. They don't look for scapegoats. They see these things as organizational situations. That's the way they've approached this from the beginning. And if they do have to fire a coach, they will consider it a failure of everybody, not just, Matt Nagy or one or two guys. They're not going to throw one guy under the bus. And they're not going to bow to public pressure, and this is where it's hard to get into George's, it's hard to get in anybody's mind, not any more difficult or less difficult with George. But, he's got to be sitting there. I have to believe, I know the man, I know he's sitting there thinking, well, what's my better option? And this is what, dramatic fans and emotional, people don't want to deal with. They just want to see Nagy pay a price. They want to see him punished. Matt's not a bad guy. Matt doesn't deserve that. I don't want to see him punished. I don't want to see him fail. I would love to see him figure out a way to turn this around. And that's what's so frustrating about all this is he's being given opportunities to turn it around. And I think the consensus opinion, Kyle, with most of the decisions he's made this week, is that if anything, they've made the situation worse.
Yeah, he's certainly made the situation worse. On an organizational standpoint, yeah, I understand why people want him fired. I mean, we are getting to the point where I hate to say deserve to be fired, but they're performing poor enough that it's a reasonable expectation to be fired. But the Bears have not showing really that ever shown the desire to make a snap judgment. I mean, they went through a terrible 0-6 snap last year where a lot of people were calling for changes. Didn't happen. So they come out and beat Detroit, it's going to be business as usual. I mean, things are going to have to get really Mark Trestman-esque bad for, I think, them to really start to feel that pressure to make a change.
Well, and here's where it gets really interesting, guys. And again, I was living it. I was there in the middle of it. The thing about Trestman is that actually it's not fair to just hang Mark. It was Phil Emery and Mark Trestman. It was the worst locker room in the NFL. it was one of the worst rosters in the NFL. That is not the case here, and that's why I think I said somewhere near the top. What I'm curious about is it feels, and again, been there most of this week, and we don't get to go in the locker room anymore because of COVID protocols, but we're still talking to these guys a few at a time. We all still have sources that we work. Everything that I'm hearing is that he very much has the support of his players, that they do have his back, that they do still want to play for him. And that is completely different than where it was with Trestman and Emery, because players were more anxious than media and fans to see them go. And so that's why I don't see anything. I mean, if you lose to the Lions, kind of all bets are off, because then it starts to get hysterical and people do hysterical things. But if they do beat the Lions, and then if they were to come back and upset their guys, I have seen teams in a lot worse trouble on the field wise, talent wise, than the Bears are at right now at 1-2, turn it around and make runs to the playoffs and win 10, 11, 12 games. I'm not predicting that. I'm just saying, you beat the Lions, you reset the clock, you have your defense steal one for you in Las Vegas. Things can get different really quickly. That's obviously what George McCaskey and Ted Phillips are hoping for right now. And they're not going to do anything rash until they let that play out and see if it can happen.
Nor should they yet. I mean, it's still really early here. So we'll see. And how I guess fortuitous for Matt Nagy that coming off one of the more scrutinized, intense weeks of his coaching career, that he gets the Lions. They're his punching bag. They've been the Bears' punching bag. If they have one in the NFL, thank you, Detroit. So just don't go and show your ass again Sunday. And I guess we can continue having these fun conversations about kicking the can down the line and prolonging the inevitable, most likely. But we'll see. We just need to see an inspired performance, right?
Yeah, Kyle, I know we've got a bunch of questions that you want to get to here, but let me just reset things a little bit real quickly. We thank you all for being with us on our ShawLocal.com Bears Insider podcast. We want to thank our great sponsors at Heinz Lumber, 11 locations around the Chicagoland area, the only place to go for all your building needs, regardless of whether it's a new house, a rehab, an addition, or maybe just the honeydew list, whatever it may be. If you've got building needs, if you've got material needs, tools, get yourself to one of your Heinz Lumber locations. Again, 11 spots around the city. We are live via YouTube. Thank God Kyle Nabors is here, because I know we use StreamYard, but if you ask me how to get into the podcast, I don't even know how I get myself in. But we're really grateful that you're all here. And I see Hairless Yoda is back. A lot of our regulars. Kyle, who do you want to bring into the conversation first?
So I think where we're at in our conversation, this is a good question to pull up here.
Dennis Lenahan. Thank you, Dennis, for joining us. Who do we think will be calling the plays on Sunday?
Should we start with Matt's answer on was that Wednesday?
It was probably the strangest head coach press conference I've ever been in my life. I mean, he gave a 237 word response, and not one of those 237 words referred to the question of who's going to be calling the plays. He was trying to rationalize a reason to not tell us, got nowhere near any acceptable reason, and just left everybody thoroughly confused. And Arthur, again, this is an example. I like the man. I want to see him do well, but he just put a second bullseye on his back now. I mean, because the natural reaction, if you're, as Kyle just said, or as Dennis just asked the question, well, how do we know? Why can't we know? What's the mystery here? It's almost like he wants to keep doing it and not be forced to take responsibility for it. The flip side, my good buddy Olin Kreutz, I saw tweeted the other day, if Matt's not saying it's going to be Laser calling the plays, Olin may have some insight. I don't. I can't guess right now based on the way he's behaved to this point and the way he, as opposed to refused to explain it to anybody.
Yeah, I think you just nailed it. I mean, when Nagy comes out of the game Sunday saying it starts with me and trying to hit an accountable tone, and then punts on the one opportunity to actually take accountability this week, asked about the play calling, to not give an answer there is pretty disappointing. But I think we'll be able to tell, guys, because if there's any hint of creativity or forward thinking or anything other than the stale craziness we've been seeing with Nagy lately, we'll probably have a pretty good idea who's calling plays.
So here's the thing too with this, if you don't want to tell us, then just say that, yeah, we're going to keep that internal. Like, don't dance around it. Given the nice 260 word, I was listening to that live, by the way, and then it was even worse when I went back and read Hub, your column there, to see it actually in print and just the jumble of words. But like, it makes it sound like you have no answers. Instead of just being like, yeah, we're going to keep that internal, it makes it sound like you don't know.
Well, by the way, Kyle, I picked, as you know, because you're my editor, I picked the 100 or so of the 237 words that made the most sense, and they made no sense. I mean, the rest of it. And then there was a second answer, which is, well, why would you tell us last year and not tell us this year? And that got even goofier. And Dennis, back to your question, and thank you for sending it. To Arthur's point, if you want to be the leader, you want to be the guy who says, come at me, leave my guys alone, then you do one of two things. You say, I'm handing the play calling off to Bill because I screwed it up and it was my fault. Or you say, I'm keeping it. I'm the boss. I'm entitled. And if you don't like it, tough. At least at that point, you are taking responsibility. And nobody's going to be talking about how awful your offensive line is. Nobody's going to be talking about your quarterbacks. Everybody, you're taking it on your shoulders and you're being the guy you say you want to be. By doing this, you're doing the opposite. And this is what troubles me. I don't know football wise, guys. I've been doing this over 40 years, and I don't ever remember being in this position where when I see what he does with the handling of his coaches, when I see how his players want to play for him, how they have his back, how they respect him, and I go back to some of the things he's done over 3+ years, not just the last year or so. We got to remember, again, this is the 2018 NFL Coach of the Year. He is not the worst football coach ever. He's not Mark Trestman. He's much better than Mark Trestman, in a lot of ways. But then given the opportunity to take advantage of his assets, Kyle, this is where he keeps stepping on it and going in the exact opposite direction.
Yeah. Delegate, right? That is the key as a head coach. Delegate. Manage the game. As much as I dislike Urban Meyer, you saw that last night. Urban Meyer, first-year head coach, trying to get his feet under him, wasn't trying to do too much last night. He allowed his coaches to call that game and get them into that game. And it's like, Matt, delegate, man. Just like, it's okay.
What else have we got here? I know we've got a bunch of comments, questions lined up. Kyle, since you're the only one capable of getting them on the air, though, you tell me who you like next.
Let's before we switch over, we got a couple defensive questions. I'm going to throw this up there. It's not really a question as much as it is a comment, and it's something that we're going to see a lot out of Bears fans, particularly if Andy Dalton is the starter on Sunday. And we might as well kind of just discuss the way fans feel, because you do wonder if this is where pressure might come from, right?
Nice, Donald.
Yeah, Donald McKendry joins us to tell us that Nagy announcing Friday that quarterback versus Lions will be a game-time decision means that his watching the Bears game versus the Lions is also a game-time decision. Donald, I like the question. I like you jumping in. We both know you're fibbing. You're going to watch the game because you want to know who the quarterback is. But you're right. I get it. I think, to Donald's point, that's an excellent point. That's the damage that Matt is doing with all this, to his fan base, to Bears Nation, to any hopes of being respected or having credibility. I actually still have a significant amount of respect for the guy because I see him every day. I work with him. I know that there are definitely qualities there to admire, but Don, he is having an awful couple of weeks. I don't know any other way to put it, but he's in a slump, and I'm hoping that the Lions are what the doctor ordered for him.
All right, well, let's hit up a couple defensive questions here. We got some highlights we can actually talk about from the first few weeks here.
Rick is a regular. Rick Gonzalez, good enough to join us every week and wants to know, in our opinions, who's having the best start on defense through 3 games. That is simple for me. Don't have to give it a second thought. So I'll wait and I'll let you guys go first. Kyle, why don't you go first this time?
I got 2 names that are jumping out to me. I think I know who you're going to go with, so I'm going to try and be a little different. I really like the way Robert Quinn has played. Has looked just like a different player from last year. Is moving the pocket, getting to the pass rusher, finishing. It's everything you expected of him when you signed him to that deal last offseason.
Arthur?
Yeah, I don't know if I think it's as cut and dried as you, but I think Roquan's played great. I think you're maybe going to say Akeem Hicks because he's been the biggest surprise. I'll probably say Jalen Johnson has just raised his game to the next level. And again, he looks like stardom is in his near future. So the way he's kind of changed this defensive tone a little bit, I feel good about that.
I guess this is part of the game. Arthur thought I was going to say Akeem Hicks or Roquan. Kyle, who'd you think I was going to say?
I thought you were going to say Jalen.
No, I think Jalen Johnson is going to be a star. Arthur is absolutely right. But to me, it's not even close. It's Robert Quinn. Robert Quinn, and again, guys, this is where it's not just because he has a couple sacks. I spend a ton of time on Sunday night and Monday studying this tape and rewatching these guys, and it's about everything they do. It's not just about the highlight play on the touchdown or the sack. Robert Quinn is playing at an all-pro level. He is playing as well as he has played at any point in his career. And when you see that get off on the snap every time, I mean, his first 3 steps are unbelievable. And to me, he is clearly of a bunch of guys who are playing well. I mean, that's the shame of it, is the defense is close. It's not there yet, but the defense is close. And the other thing that you got to realize, guys, they have yet to take the field with more than 9 starters. And Sunday they took the field with 8 starters and played with 7 for a while Khalil Mack was in the locker room. And the Browns finally got their running game going late in the third quarter, throughout the fourth quarter. Yeah, the final numbers looked ugly, but that defense, in spite of being on the field twice as much as the offense, still only allowed 1 touchdown. They forced the Browns to kick in the second half. They forced the Browns to kick 3 field goals. And that's what you want your defense to do. 2 fourth-down sacks. I mean, the defense is close. And I think that Jalen Johnson is probably close to Kyle Fuller right now. And he's going to continue to get better. Roquan Smith was second-team All-Pro last year. There's no reason off the first 3 weeks to believe he won't be first-team this year. Akeem has shown his age a little bit. He is still a dominant interior tackle, but to your point, Arthur, he makes a few plays a game where you say, "Oh wow, that's Akeem Hicks, man." But he's not showing up as often as he did a couple of years ago. Now, that may just be getting back in the flow, but it may be getting Eddie Goldman back, which would really help. And by the way, Khalil Mack probably had his best game in a year and a half on Sunday. And it wasn't just the Willis Reed act, coming back out of the locker room and playing on that foot. Again, study the tape and you look at the impact. Sean Desai has found something. When he puts Robert Quinn and Khalil Mack on the same side of the field, offenses have no idea what to do. And they're going to continue to do more of that. And so I think you're going to start to see even more pressure and more takeaways.
It really is a shame because when we talked on the podcast last week, that I felt that the Bears matched up really well with the Browns, why I picked the Bears to win that game. And that defense did exactly what I thought they could do against the Browns. They play really well against a run. Baker Mayfield is not going to – Baker Mayfield's okay, but he's just not going to beat a lot of teams. You know what I mean? The Bears had a chance in that game. I just never expected the offense to fall apart the way it did, Arthur.
A tough watch. That's the irony is it was, if ever there was a burn the tape game, that was it. But I think Justin Fields probably had to watch that tape a few times this week. And a few of these other guys did too, to remind themselves that they have a lot of pride that needs to be on full display Sunday, because that was a troubling performance. Hub, I believe you guys are tuned in way more than me. I'm not suggesting Nagy's lost the locker room, but I will definitely say that was a little bit, there was a feeling of apathy, right, at times in that game. I don't think they were just overmatched and overpowered. That was a listless Sunday in Cleveland.
Well, Arthur, again, this is what we're talking about. I never saw the defense listless. I thought the defense played balls to the wall for the most part, you
right.
know. And
his side of the ball isn't the defense's.
Yeah, well, I mean, the offense we know is awful, and it was disturbing that the offensive line could be that bad. One other point here, Kyle, and I got this from a really good source who I trust. I think Baker Mayfield's got a bum shoulder that they're not reporting, or I think it was rumored to be a concern. But the guy I talked to said that he's okay to play on it. But the first thing I noticed is he airmailed his first 3 throws to the left side to his left side of the field, and he was not able to get through on that ball. And he settled down a little bit. He made some nice throws throughout the game. I'm a Baker Mayfield fan. I think he may get to a point where he can be a guy who beats you. And I think that, the Browns obviously didn't need any more from him Sunday. But that probably did help a little bit. Actually, on 2 of the 3 throws he airmailed, Jalen Johnson had blanket coverage. And, the flip side of it is maybe he did it on purpose because he wanted to get the ball picked. But I do think he was struggling a little bit out there.
Yeah, he was, and I'm a Baker Mayfield fan too. I do think eventually he's going to round into a better form. He just isn't at that point quite yet. We got another question here from CJ Williams on the defensive front that I think is a good one to bring up at this point.
Yeah, CJ, that is a great question because of something that Sean Desai said yesterday. CJ is asking if Danny Trevathan returns to his starting position with Al Ogletree playing all right so far this season. I think the answer is yes. Danny Trevathan, along with Akeem Hicks and Khalil Mack, is the most important leader on that defense. And you see other guys, younger guys, trying to step up, but Danny's a guy that everybody looks to. And he was playing at a really high level, the second half of the season, even in that playoff game against the Saints last year. And this knee, he's had bothersome knees over the years, but this is not a chronic thing that, if he's ready now, he should be okay, able to get back into shape again. He was on the field this week at Hallis Hall. Rarely do you come off IR and play that first Sunday. And the way that Ogletree is playing allows him, to take a week or two to get ready. But ask Thursday if there was a role for Alec Ogletree in the defense once Danny Trevathan comes back. Sean Desai said, well, I'm not sure which one you're assuming is starting. And I think that what Sean was saying, we know that eventually Trevathan will get his starting job back, but I don't think it's imminent. And I think what he's saying is that Ogletree hasn't played that much worse than Trevathan, and you definitely need 3 or 4. They are loaded at linebacker this year. I mean, you saw Khalil go down, and Jeremiah Adeocho, he didn't get home, but he created some pressure. Travis Gibson had a few nice rushes, his first extended playing time, and I've been worried about where he is and when he's going to show up. And then inside, you've got not only Ogletree, but Christian Jones plays outside and inside. So, I think they're going to let Trevathan take his time, CJ, but Arthur, I don't know, maybe you disagree. I think you'll see Trevathan back as the starter and one of the first 2 guys in the rotation, if not for the Raiders, and certainly by the week after.
Yeah, more than likely. I think the better all these guys are playing, the more flexibility Desai has. And if we're not seeing, unfortunately, the flexibility from Matt Nagy on the other side of the ball that we want, at least there are hints of it with Sean Desai, right? Like you said, scheming Khalil Mack and Robert Quinn on the same side, and some of the things we've seen from him to show some creativity. So I think that bodes well to make sure he's getting his best players on the field and putting them in good spots.
Kyle, I don't know what you think, but I do know, I promise we're going to get back at least for a minute or two to a couple other subjects, and we do want to take a little closer look at the matchups with the Lions and then talk about Arlington Heights. Maybe let's get 2 more questions, and then maybe we'll put a wrap on it, getting ready for Sunday.
We got one more. I think this one will be really quick, and then we'll talk Detroit, Arlington, and get out of here.
V Law wants to know, have we heard any news on Cohen? Well, Tarik, a different designation because he started because he spent the training camp on the PUP list, physically unable to perform, and started the season on that list. They were not forced to clear a roster spot for him to get down to 53, but that also causes him to wait 6 weeks rather than the 3 weeks that the guys on IR are waiting this year, which was a special dispensation as an extra hedge against, COVID losses and other things and being more flexible with these guys. So he's not eligible to even begin practicing for 3 more weeks. So no, we're not hearing a lot. I do watch him every day. He is out on the field. He's finally moving better. As recently as 3-4 weeks ago, you could still see a clear hitch in his giddy up, if you will. But it's not something anybody's talking about right now, V, because it's not an option. But I do think they're hopeful that week 7, week 8, that they get Tarik back and he's close to 100%, which would make sense because ACLs these days, they're 12 to 15 month injuries. Some guys come back in 9 months. He hurt it week 3 last week. Had last year, had to wait a few weeks for the swelling to go down before he had the surgery. So, mid-season is on the longer end of ACL rehabs these days, but it's not unusual. It's not a concern. All right. Well, should we talk some Detroit Lions football? Well, you know what? Let's, Kyle. I don't care. We can go whichever way. Let's touch on Arlington Heights, and then because we should leave everybody thinking about a game that is probably the biggest game in Matt Nagy's life, as well as a number of Chicago Bears. Guys, when it was first reported, what was it, about 6 weeks ago, that the Bears had made a bid, I remember starting my column with, I've been on the beat 45 years, and the first story I ever worked on was George Hallis talking about threatening to move the Bears to Arlington Heights. And that we've had the story come back 6 or 7 times, and every time we knew there was no way it was going to happen. Well, when it first came up 6, 7 weeks ago, we talked about this time it is going to happen for all the reasons that it didn't happen the first 5, 6, or 7 times. And that is because now the Bears have the wherewithal. It was never just the money. It was about being able to put together a financing package, because no NFL owner pays for their stadium all on their own out of their pocket or out of petty cash. And it was having to understand real estate development, how to get something like this done. When the Bears announced about 4 or 5 months ago that they had signed Bet Rivers as their exclusive gaming partner, Bet Rivers Casino is owned 39% by Neil Bloom, who runs the operation and who became a billionaire as a real estate developer. The other 61% is owned by Churchill Downs, who are the people that the Bears are buying the land from. And so these guys clearly intend to be partners in this. There's no question with what's happening around the country and around the league, there's going to be a casino or some kind of gaming property attached to it. There is going to be a hotel, some restaurants, probably condominiums and some office buildings. Now they've got partners in this, or they will become partners, I can practically guarantee you, who are perfectly suited to get this done. The thing that Bears fans need to understand is this is a 5 or 6 year process. There are environmental studies that have to be done. The state has to get involved. There has to be infrastructure additions. What you cannot do is say, we're just going to leave it alone right now and build a stadium. You think you have access problems at Soldier Field? Try getting into that place if they've got 80,000 seats in it with 53 and neighborhood city streets being the only access. That's not going to work.
I was just there about 2 months ago to see some horse racing. I don't care about horse racing at all, but I got a good friend that loves it. And just getting out of there on a Saturday afternoon with maybe 10,000 people there was a bear.
Yeah, I mean, it's and obviously no pun intended, but I mean, you know,
I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, there you go. Hampton had a great one on the TV show this week, the Pro Football Weekly TV show. He loves to go for his quips. He wanted to go for a Trey Lance, and he pointed out to us that he thinks this is the week we're going to see Lance a lot. So anyway, I love that one. Had to get it out there sometime. This is happening, folks, and what you now need to understand is that there's really nothing standing in the way. The only issue is going to be there is going to be protest at some point coming from some segment of the population of Arlington Heights. It's no different than the Obama Presidential Library, whatever. And I'm not taking any sides here, guys, but you know, it is going to cause a huge disruption, you know, in the area, in the neighborhood, and some people aren't going to like it. So once all those battles get done, because progress is going to win, they're going to be the Chicago Bears, but they're going to be playing in Arlington Heights. Arthur, I'm convinced, and I'm going to guess it'll be 6 years.
Right. I think I even read, isn't there like the most reasonable out in the lease comes after 4 more seasons? So I don't know if that would put 2026. There you go. So is it 5 more seasons? 22.
Yeah, but guys, let's be honest about it. They don't need an out in the lease, because at the end of the day, you know, you're talking about $6 million in rent, and the lease expires in 32. Yeah. So if they're ready to go in 27, you got 5 years left. If you're spending $2 billion on a stadium, you'll give the city the $30 million to buy your way out of the lease, which is, by the way, one of the reasons I think everybody's expecting Mayor Lightfoot to panic on this. I happen to like her, and again, it's not political. I don't know that much about her politics. I just think she's really tough and really smart, and I think she knows how to pick her battles. And in this case, she's obviously, you know, going to be the stern school marm and say, well, you know, we're not happy with them, and they're not negotiating in good faith and all that. But she knows full well it's not really going to hurt that much. I mean, it's going to bring Super Bowls and NCAA finals and monster events. All those people that come are still going to want to stay downtown. You know, they're not going to get stuck with the lease. The only thing that the city really loses here is those 10 days of game day revenue. And even some of that is still going to be in the city. So I just don't see this as a huge loss to the city. This has happened all over the country with NFL teams. You know, the Cowboys don't play in Dallas. The Patriots don't play in Boston. That's not really an issue.
So go ahead,
Kyle. Sorry.
Okay. I mean, the landscape started to change in the last decade when you saw these teams starting to not just build stadiums, but build entire communities around them and all the revenue that comes with it. And then it really accelerated with the legalization of gambling across the U.S. Sports gambling, because I mean we did see, I'm sorry, I don't remember if it's the Chicago Tribune, whoever had the email from the mayor's office where they had essentially turned down an opportunity when the Bears had requested about being able to have a sports book nearby Soldier Field. That's a big thing. What these teams want that control, and one of the things at Arlington already, it's on the southwest corner. I mean, they have their own sports book there. I think it's through maybe Hawthorne right now. I can't remember. PointsBet, one of those. And so like that's what they want. They want to be able to build all that up, and they want the gambling revenue.
Yeah, guys. I mean, it'll be a story. We'll watch it. There's going to be phases to go through, but I just, to me, it's not even that controversial. It's going to happen, and I think it's good for everybody.
It's going to be sweet. I'm sure it's going to be awesome. I hope it has retractable roof.
Oh right? yeah, they will.
I mean, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, they have a real estate developer involved now. It's not Michael McCaskey working with his favorite architect. And Michael, God bless his soul, may he rest in peace, was a good friend of mine, but he screwed that up, so badly. What happened there with Soldier Field is that Michael McCaskey and Richie Daley became such bitter enemies that whoever followed Michael was going to get a stadium from Richie Daley, and that was Ted Phillips. And then Richie Daley took him to school and said, "This is what you're getting," and what they got was much better than what they had. But the day they moved in, it was the second smallest stadium in the league, and that's why eventually this was always going to happen too. The McCaskeys just, and by the way, maybe George deserves a ton of credit. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Maybe he is the mastermind behind this. It's quite possible. Minimally, he's taking the right steps so far, but he needed people with experience in this arena to help him make it happen. And now he's got the right folks to work with. So, guys, we've got the Lions Sunday. It is the biggest game this organization has seen in the last, well, at least going back to the wild card game and the double doink against the Eagles. Not for all the right reasons, or not all the reasons that we would hope, but nonetheless, if the Bears do answer the bell, everybody's going to be happy. And, Kyle, I'll come back to you first. I look at the matchup, once we get through everything else, any NFL team can win on any given Sunday. We know that. I'm not trying to disparage the Lions, but they're in a complete rebuild. They've got a new GM. They've got a new head coach. There's a reason they're 0-3. They don't have near the level of talent that the Bears do. And it's not like they've played that much better than the Bears. As a matter of fact, I would argue that at this point, with what we know about these 3 weak teams, that the Rams, the Bengals, and the Browns is probably a little tougher road than, what was it? The 49ers, and then the Packers, and then the Ravens. So I can't find a matchup or a reason that says the Bears shouldn't win this game without even knowing who the quarterback is.
Yeah. I mean, you look at let's start with Jared Goff. This is a quarterback the Bears have faced, 4 straight years when he was with the Rams. I think it was 4 straight years. They know him well. He isn't good. They play him well. And then the strength is, comparatively, the strength of the Lions offense is their running back. And last I looked, I haven't had a chance to check today to see if DeAndre Swift practiced fully. I know he's really dinged up though. And the Bears are good, really good against the run. Even if DeAndre Swift does get back to full health. The thing is, it's just their defense matches up incredibly well. They should be able to control this game. They just have to be competent on offense, and they should roll.
Well, yeah, Arthur, and then you look at the injury list. The 3 guys that the Lions can least afford to have in jeopardy are in jeopardy. Swift is battling a groin. I expect he'll play. He practiced all week but was limited. But then you've got Trey Flowers and Michael Brockers, who are the 2 stalwarts on that defense. I think that Flowers missed practice on Wednesday and then was limited the rest of the week. Brockers has been limited. And so if those guys aren't 100%, I keep looking around. I mean, I'll ask you guys if you can. I can, because I've been studying it for the last 16 hours, but I couldn't by Wednesday night. Can you even name another receiver on this team other than T.J. Hawkinson at tight end? There really isn't.
Quinton
Cephas. Yeah.
We play fantasy, and maybe one of us gambles a little bit. So yeah, I know it, but yes.
So yeah, I mean, obviously that
I know the names. I wish I didn't.
Yeah,
he's out of Wisconsin, right? I think he might have went to Wisconsin.
I don't know where he went. And I know I've seen him, he's got 2 touchdowns this year. But I will say that if the Bears lose to Quentin Cephas, don't just fire Matt Nagy, fire every player on the team too. I mean, that just shouldn't happen.
You guys hit the nail on the head. I think the one place where the Lions might be decent is actually the O-line, and that's going up against the Bears' best unit on the team. So they should be good there. TJ Hawkinson's a really good emerging player, so that'll be fun to watch Roquan versus Hawkinson. Swift, too, if he's out there. Those guys can be dangerous, but for 4 quarters, I just think the Bears aren't one of the more talented teams in the NFL, but there's still a major disparity, I think, with where the Lions are at this point.
Yeah, guys, I mean, I would love to have TJ Hawkinson on my team. I'd like to have DeAndre Swift on my team. But when all you've got is a running back and a tight end, Jalen Johnson, we've talked about several times, it's because he's playing that well. Eddie Jackson didn't play badly against Cleveland. There was another mental error and there was one bad angle, but he also still did some pretty good things. I'm pretty sure you're not going to see Tayshaun Gibson, but they don't lose that much when Deion Bush steps up. Kendall Vildor, I guess, is the guy to watch because while he impressed me the first 2 weeks, he was overmatched last week in Cleveland a few times. And that's I'm sure, where the Lions and Jared Goff will try and attack, as well as at the nickel, where, Duke Shelley got another chance and again, didn't do much. He wasn't as bad as he was the week before. So, I don't see where the Lions are going to attack, that they're going to be able to score enough points on the Bears. And I just don't think the Bears offense is that bad that they can't hang 20, 23, 26 on the Lions.
Yeah, you're right. But guys, you're bringing up DeAndre Swift. I just got sad over here, realizing that his prime years are going to be wasted away on a just terrible rebuilding Detroit team. I hate when teams draft running
we've
backs.
heard that before.
I hate when teams draft running backs high when they're clearly several years away from competing.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but remember the rebuild started shortly after that draft. Maybe it should have started sooner.
It should have started sooner.
I mean, at that point, it was still the Matt Patricia show. So that's a different subject for a different time. Guys, we are out of time this week. I want to again thank our great sponsors, the Heinz Lumber Company, 11 great locations around the Chicagoland area. We want to thank Arthur Arkush for grabbing Sean's chair again this week. And Sean Hammond will be back with us next week. I'm sure Arthur will be back with us at time during the course of the season as well. I also really want to give a special shout out today to 2 of Arthur's nieces and 1 of his nephews, because we have done this podcast with Papa babysitting, and the 3 of them, I figured screen time would cover it and we could get through this. I'm sure you heard them once or twice in the last 10, 15 minutes, but for these youngins to be as good as they've been for almost an hour, I didn't know how we were going to get through this. So thank you guys. Love you all.
They deserve some ice cream for this.
They got one treat after another coming, including Uncle Arthur and their cousins coming to see him tomorrow. So
looking forward to it.
I was going to say it's going to be a good weekend at the Arkush household. It's going to be a good Friday and Saturday. We'll see how Sunday goes. So until then, guys, everybody have a great weekend. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast this week, and we'll talk to you again next week.